Jack Hawkins stood among Britain's most prominent film actors of the 1950s, known for embodying military officials with his stern presence and hint of vulnerability. However, just as Hawkins peaked in popularity, he faced a devastating cancer diagnosis. The removal of his larynx left him unable to speak naturally again, but he persevered in pursuing acting opportunities despite lacking the definitive voice that made him a star. Join Factsverse as we chronicle the tragic medical condition that robbed Jack Hawkins of his voice in his final decade. Early life and career. Jack Hawkins was born John Edward Hawkins on September 14, 1910, in Wood Green, London. He grew up in Wood Green with his father, who was a builder. Hawkins recalled that he adored acting from the first moment. He said the excitement, thrill, and smell of the theater went right down to his toes. He made his theatrical debut at age 12 at the Holborn Empire, playing an elf king in the Christmas pantomime Where the Rainbow Ends on Boxing Day 1923. The production also featured a young Noel Coward. The following year, when Hawkins was 14, he played the page in a production of George Bernard Shaw's St. Joan. 5 years later, he acted alongside Laurence Olivier in Beau Geste. Hawkins also performed in the companies of renowned actors like Sybil Thorndike, John Gielgud, and Basil Dean in the 30s. While taking stage roles seriously, he started appearing in films during that decade. His early film roles encompassed quota quickies as well as more prestigious productions like Hitchcock's The Phantom Fiend. Other credits included Who Goes Next and A Royal Divorce. Hawkins married his Autumn Crocus co-star Jessica Tandy in October of 1932. The couple had a daughter named Susan in 1934 before divorcing in 1940. When Tandy took a role in America, Hawkins volunteered for the British Army. He spent most of the war arranging entertainment for British troops in India. While serving in the military, he met Doreen Lawrence, another actress entertaining the troops. They married in October of 1947, establishing a partnership that lasted until Hawkins' death. They had 3 children, Caroline, Andrew, and Nicholas. After the war ended, Alexander Korda, the famous Hungarian film magnate, convinced Hawkins to focus on his film career and offered him a 3-year contract. This advice led Hawkins to become one of Britain's biggest stars just a few years later. Rise to stardom in the 50s. Hawkins initially struggled after signing with Korda, appearing in the producer's notorious box office flop, Bonnie Prince Charlie, in 1948. However, he rebounded with strong performances in Carol Reed's acclaimed The Fallen Idol that same year, and Powell and Pressburger's The Small Back Room in 1949. He also impressed as the villain in the popular thriller State Secret, starring Douglas Fairbanks Jr. The 50s marked Hawkins' rise to stardom in British cinema. He showcased his ability to play stern but sympathetic authority figures. According to a contemporary press account, Hawkins exemplified for many cinema-goers the stiff upper lip tradition prevalent in post-war British films, with his upright bearing and authoritative presence. In the aerial drama Angels 1-5, he garnered acclaim as a determined RAF officer during the Battle of Britain. He also stood out as a rubber plantation owner combating communists in Malaya in The Planter's Wife, starring opposite Claudette Colbert. As the headmaster of a school for the deaf in Mandy, Hawkins displayed his emotional range. But the definitive Jack Hawkins performance came in the naval drama The Cruel Sea in 1953, where he played the commander Erickson. Hawkins suffered from lifelong seasicknesses, making the portrayal more challenging. Michael Balkin, the producer, stated they were certain Jack Hawkins had to be cast for the role even before the script was completed. He emphasized that if Hawkins had not been available, the film would not have been made. The Cruel Sea dramatized the war at sea and the stresses endured by the British Navy. Rather than false heroics, Hawkins and his co-stars presented a realistic depiction of men at war. The film was hugely successful, topping the British box office for the year. Hawkins was voted the most popular international star regardless of nationality by UK exhibitors. He consolidated his fame as a reliable leading man in military adventures and dramas over the next few years. He portrayed a determined RAF officer in the Siege of Malta in Malta Story and had an emotional role as a double agent in The Two-Headed Spy. His most famous appearances included supporting parts in David Lean's classic The Bridge on the River Kwai and William Wyler's blockbuster Ben-Hur. He also found time to play varied roles in comedies like Touch and Go. Battling throat cancer. At the peak of his fame, Hawkins faced a tragic personal setback, starting in 1959 when he underwent cobalt treatment for a throat condition. He was a 3-pack-a-day smoker and started experiencing voice problems in the late 50s. While not made public at the time, he was suffering from throat cancer. According to a later account, Hawkins grew worried about his voice and the possibility of losing it entirely. He knew he had to take as much work as possible while still at the top of his game. This motivation may explain some questionable role choices, like playing the secondary part of an American general in the European spectacle Lafayette. In 1961, Hawkins gave an interview where he discussed the lack of mature leading men in the industry, saying it seemed like a generation was missing. He noted that many actors had drifted away from the profession during World War II and struggled to regain their footing after. Little did Hawkins know at the time he would soon join the ranks of actors facing career uncertainty for medical reasons. In December 1965, doctors gave Hawkins the devastating cancer diagnosis. The following month, surgeons removed his entire larynx in hopes of containing the disease. However, the operation thoroughly compromised his ability to speak naturally. Hawkins instead had to rely on voice dubbing from that point on, often by established actors like Robert Rietti and Charles Gray. Remarkably, Hawkins was determined not to let the loss of his voice stop his acting ambitions. In March of 1966, the actor made a dramatic return to the public eye, attending a Royal Film performance of Born Free. Hawkins received a standing ovation from an audience including Queen Elizabeth herself. While he could no longer speak parts, his face retained the gravitas and presence that had made him a star. Persevering. After facing the immense challenge of losing his larynx, Hawkins demonstrated remarkable courage by continuing his film career. In '68, he played prominent supporting roles in the western Shalako with Sean Connery and the historical comedy Great Catherine with Jean Moreau. The next year saw him take a wordless part as Emperor Franz Joseph I in Richard Attenborough's acclaimed World War I musical, Oh, What a Lovely War. Casting agents realized Hawkins could use his reputation and physical acting to enhance historical productions. In the early 70s, he assumed minor roles in grand spectacles like Waterloo, Nicholas and Alexandra, and Young Winston. His death. In May of '73, he attempted one last-ditch medical effort to restore his voice by having an artificial larynx implanted. But he suffered post-surgical complications, leading to hemorrhaging, and was admitted to a London hospital the next month. His health sharply declined, forcing him to exit the film The Tamarind Seed that July. Unable to recover, Hawkins died at age 62 on July 18, 1973. Now it's time to hear from you. Which one of Jack Hawkins' acclaimed roles was your favorite? Let us know in the comment section below.